silence at 500 feet. Your heart pounds, the runway beckons behind you, and instinct screams to turn back. But most pilots who answer that call never walk away. Data shows nearly 9 out of 10 do not survive the turn. The real danger is not lack of altitude. It is a hidden aerodynamic debt that collects instantly and without mercy. Why does chasing the runway end in tragedy almost every time? The answer starts with your brain's deadliest impulse. The moment the engine quits, the world narrows to a single, terrible choice. The cockpit fills with a silence so loud, it drowns out thought. In that instant, most pilots do not reach for checklists or logic. They reach for hope. Their eyes snap to the runway behind them, the strip of asphalt that promised safety just seconds ago. Every nerve screams to turn back. The mind clings to the comfort of the familiar, the known, the place where the flight began. But the runway is a mirage, its safety an illusion. Inside the cockpit, the body reacts before reason can catch up. Heart pounding, hands gripping the yoke, breath shallow. Brain scientists call it the startle response, a jolt that buys you 4 seconds of nothing. 4 seconds where the airplane is already sinking at 1,000 feet per minute, burning through altitude you do not have. By the time your mind clears, you have lost 400 feet of your meager supply. That is the first trap. The numbers have not even entered the picture, but you are already deep in debt. The runway behind you glows in your memory, brighter than the unknown ahead. Trees, rooftops, the edge of the airport boundary, those are the threats your mind wants to avoid. The runway represents order, routine, the end of the emergency. But the physics of flight do not care about comfort. They care about energy, and every heartbeat spent in shock is another foot lost to gravity. Investigators walk these crash sites again and again. The pattern repeats. Wreckage pointed back toward the runway, nose buried, wings snapped. The pilot made the turn, but never made the landing. Nearly 70% of engine failures after takeoff end with a turn-back attempt. In more than 80% of those, the final heading is toward the runway, not away from it. The numbers are not on your side. The mind's instinct is powerful. It is the reason so many pilots pull the yoke and bank into the impossible. But the decision is made in those first 4 seconds, while the airplane is already falling. The urge to chase the runway is almost universal. The outcome is nearly always the same. The real enemy is not just altitude or airspeed, it is the invisible gap between what you feel and what you have. The next time the engine quits, the question is not whether you can make it back. The question is whether you can resist the siren call of the runway long enough to survive. The numbers behind that urge are waiting, and they are never kind. Altitude is the only currency that matters after an engine failure. Every foot above the ground is money in the bank, and the moment the prop goes quiet, you start spending fast. Most pilots imagine they have a healthy balance. They see blue sky and think, I have time. But the math is ruthless. 4 seconds of shock already took 400 feet from your account. Now you are left with whatever scraps remain, and the runway is demanding a withdrawal you cannot afford. A flight instructor has a saying, you can only spend altitude once. In simulators and real-world demonstrations, the numbers never lie. A typical Cessna 172 trimmed for best glide loses about 400 feet just getting to a safe speed and a stable descent after the surprise. That is before you even touch the yoke. If you start with 500 feet, you are nearly broke before you make a single decision. Picture your altitude as a battery meter. The engine failure is a short circuit. The first bar vanishes to the startle response. The second bar drains as the airplane settles into its glide. By the time you even consider turning, you are already operating on a red warning light. The urge to turn is strong, but the runway is not where you left it. A real turn back is not a simple half circle. It is a teardrop path, out, around, and back, because you need to clear the airport boundary and realign for landing. In the best case scenario, A trainer like a Piper or Cessna needs at least 650 to 1,000 feet of altitude to make the full maneuver, assuming no wind and perfect execution. Most attempts start at half that height, sometimes less. The result is always the same. The airplane runs out of altitude before it completes the turn. A flight instructor once put it bluntly during a demonstration. Try the turn at 500 feet and you will meet the ground before you see the numbers. In the simulator, the heads-up display shows the altimeter spinning down, the glide path sinking below the trees. The runway slips away over your shoulder, but the altimeter does not care about hope. It only counts feet lost. The credit card metaphor fits. The runway is asking for a massive purchase, but your account is already overdrawn. Swipe for the turn, and gravity collects the debt instantly. The airplane has no overdraft protection. The only way to survive is to spend what little altitude you have wisely. That means keeping the wings level, preserving every foot, and accepting that the field ahead is your best, sometimes only option. Physics does not negotiate. The numbers from accident reports and simulator runs agree. The teardrop turn costs more altitude than you have in the bank. Every attempt to cheat the ledger ends the same way. Wreckage pointed back at the runway and a balance sheet that never adds up. Bank angle is the silent thief in every failed turnback. The moment you roll the wings, you change the rules of flight. In straight and level flight, a Cessna 172 stalls at about 48 knots indicated airspeed. Angle the wings to 45 degrees and the airplane is suddenly carrying half again as much weight because of the load factor. The formula is simple, but the consequences are anything but. Stall speed in a bank equals the clean stall speed multiplied by the square root of 1 divided by the cosine of the bank angle. At 45 degrees, that means 48 knots times 1.41. The new stall speed leaps to 57 knots, a 19% jump just for turning. That increase is not a suggestion, it is a demand. The margin between flying and falling shrinks with every degree of bank. In the cockpit, the airspeed indicator green arc is supposed to be comfort. At 45 degrees, the safe zone evaporates. The stall horn is closer than you think, and any distraction or hesitation can tip you over the edge. FAA performance charts spell it out in cold numbers. A 45-degree bank in a Cessna or Piper trainer is not a gentle maneuver. The load factor climbs to 1.41 G. The airplane must fly faster to stay airborne. After an engine failure, you are already bleeding speed and altitude. The turn back to the runway is not just a question of geometry, it is a question of physics and physiology. The hands shake, the brain lags, and the airplane is unforgiving. Most pilots, in the panic of the moment, forget that the stall speed is no longer the number in the book. They enter the turn at glide speed, not realizing the margin is gone. At 55 knots in a steep bank, you are flying on a razor's edge. Any pull on the yoke, any gust, any slip of coordination, and the wing will quit flying. The stall is not gentle. It is abrupt, and at low altitude, it is final. This is not theoretical. Accident reports are filled with cases where the pilot banked hard, the stall speed climbed, and the airplane stopped flying long before the runway came into view. The numbers are always the same: 45 degrees of bank, airspeed just below the new stall threshold, and a sudden, unrecoverable drop. The NTSB calls it loss of control in flight. In reality, it is the math collecting its due. The runway behind you might look close, but every degree of bank is a withdrawal from your safety margin. The equation does not care about intentions, only about energy and speed. The more you bank, the more you owe, and the less you have to pay. In the end, the airplane limits are set not by hope, but by the cold logic of lift and gravity. There is a moment, right at the edge of the turn, when the airplane betrays you. The nose is up, the airspeed is bleeding away, and the ground is no longer a distant problem. It is a clock running out of seconds. The pilot pulls harder, desperate to keep the horizon in the windshield, but the inside wing is already whispering its warning. In a steep bank, the stall speed is not what is printed in the manual. At 45 degrees, the stall comes early, 57 knots in a Cessna 172, almost 20% higher than level flight. But panic does not care about numbers. Every accident report tells the same story in different handwriting. The turn starts wide, then tightens as the pilot realizes the runway is slipping away. Airspeed drops below the new stall threshold. The yoke comes back. The inside wing, flying slower than the outside, reaches its limit first. Suddenly, lift collapses, not evenly, but asymmetrically. The airplane yaws, the nose slices down, and the world begins to spin. Investigators call it a cross-control snap. Pilots never see it coming until the horizon whips sideways and the altimeter unwinds in a blur. In the cockpit, there is no warning. The stall horn might blare, but at low altitude, there is no time left to react. Recovery from a spin demands at least 500 feet, more in most aircraft. But these spins start at 300 feet, sometimes less. The ground rushes up at nearly 2,000 feet per minute. In the time it takes to say, "I have got it," the airplane is already out of options. The famous Traumahawk video plays out the sequence in real time. Engine failure at 500 feet. The pilot banks hard, trying to claw back to the runway. The airspeed drops. The inside wing stalls. The airplane snaps into a spin at 300 feet. There is no altitude to recover. The impact is nose first, wings canted, fuselage twisted back toward the airport. The wreckage orientation is always the same, pointed at the place the pilot was trying to reach. This is not just a trainer problem. Bush pilots in Alaska call it the moose stall. Swerving to avoid an obstacle, they pull into a steep turn at low speed. The inside wing stalls and the airplane cartwheels into the tundra. The names change, but the physics stay the same. The inside wing always loses the fight first. Cross-control inputs, rudder one way, aileron the other, make the stall deeper, more violent. The spin is instant and unrecoverable. NTSB investigators walk these sites with practiced eyes. They measure the bank angle, the distance from the airport, the scars in the dirt. The verdict is always terse: loss of control, stall spin at low altitude, wreckage facing the runway. In over 80% of these cases, the attempt to turn back ends with a fatal spin. The numbers do not lie. Once the airplane enters auto-rotation at low altitude, there is no escape. The finality is absolute. The urge to save the airplane is strong, but the numbers on the ground are stronger. Every degree of bank, every knot below the stall, every second spent turning instead of flying, these are the ingredients for disaster. At 300 feet, the spin is not a maneuver. It is a verdict. And the runway, so close, is nothing but a shadow in the windshield. Survivors of straight-ahead, forced landings carry a message written in bruises, not eulogies. One pilot, engine gone at 500 feet, aimed the nose at a patchwork of corn and fence posts. The airplane hit nose first, the firewall crushing in a controlled collapse. The propeller sheared off. The engine block and firewall took the punch, buckling and absorbing the shock. The cockpit stayed intact. The pilot unlatched his harness, heart pounding but spine unbroken, and walked away. This is not luck, it's design. General Aviation aircraft like the Cessna 172 and Piper Cherokee are built to die for you. The engine compartment and firewall act as a crumple zone, soaking up most of the kinetic energy in a forward impact. FAA crash studies and NTSB investigations show the majority of survivable forced landings share the same story. The nose is crushed and the cabin is not. In a straight-ahead crash at glide speed, the firewall absorbs the brunt of the force, keeping lethal deceleration out of the cockpit. Statistics back up the philosophy. Straight ahead, forced landings after engine failure have a fatality rate of about 10%. In contrast, attempted turnbacks, maneuvers that bypass the aluminum shield, end fatally nearly 90% of the time. Investigators find the evidence in the wreckage: nose collapsed, seats upright, seatbelts holding. The airplane is expendable. The human inside is not. The doctrine is simple. Let the airframe die first. The airplane is your shield, not your legacy. Aim the cowling at the threat and give the machine permission to sacrifice itself. The survivor's voice is clear. Crushing the cowling is better than crushing your spine. Practice is the firewall between instinct and disaster. Instructors drill the straight-ahead doctrine until it becomes automatic, stripping away the urge to turn back. The first step is altitude. Every forced landing simulation starts at 1,500 to 2,500 feet above ground, high enough to build the right reflexes without risk. At altitude, the instructor calls engine failure, no warning, just silence. The student counts 4 seconds before touching the controls, feeling the startle, watching the altimeter drop. Only then does the drill begin. Push the nose down, stabilize at best glide speed, scan for a landing spot directly ahead. No turns, no hesitation. The lesson is ruthless. Every foot lost to indecision is a foot you cannot spend later. Simulators play their part too. Federal Aviation Administration approved modules. Let pilots rehearse the scenario over and over, each time tracking stall margins and descent rates. The software flashes red when airspeed dips below safe thresholds. Bank angles are measured, not guessed. Every mistake is logged, every recovery critiqued. The checklist is short: engine out, count to 4, nose down, wings level, pick a field. Repeat until the muscle memory drowns out the temptation to turn. Certified flight instructors hammer home one rule: rehearse the impossible turn only at safe altitudes. At 1,500 feet or above, practice the full teardrop maneuver: bank, roll, recover, so the body knows what the numbers demand. Below that, the doctrine is absolute. Straight ahead, no questions. The drills are not about hope. They are about survival. The reflex you build on quiet days is the one that will save you when the engine quits for real. Every year, NTSB reports still show wreckage pointed toward the runway, proof the instinct to save the airplane often costs the pilot's life. Modern aircraft are engineered to shield you in a forward crash, not to reward a desperate turn. In a crisis, physics will not compromise, but your training can. Survival is not luck, it is discipline in the face of fear. Let the plane go. Walk away. Live to fly another day.